Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti Zenati. My guest today is Yoni Heilman. He began his career in the political spheres of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Israeli Knesset before serving as a special advisor for Taglit Birthright Israel. After earning his MBA from Boston University and leading operations for social enterprises, he stepped into his current role as CEO of TamidGroup, where he connects thousands of students globally to the Israeli business ecosystem. A frequent writer for the Times of Israel and a dedicated IDF reservist, Yoni brings a unique perspective on the intersection of professional leadership and the U.S.-Israel relationship. Yoni, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Esti.
Thank you. Was that a good introduction?
Sure. Very flattering.
Good. All right. So you grew up in the U.S., right? And then went kind of back and forth, U.S. and Israel?
Yes, my father's work took us back and forth to Israel, so I call it bicultural personality disorder.
Oh, so what was that like for you growing up in that manner? And also, were there any specific anchor points in your upbringing that first made Israel feel like tangible part of your identity rather than just another country on the map?
For sure. So, I mean, growing up back and forth, to me, it seemed very natural because that was how it was. We would spend every summer in Israel, and we would, it seems like every 3 or 4 years, he was somehow taking a sabbatical or writing a book. And so we spent extended periods of time there. I think for me, the anchor was probably Kita Aleph, first grade. We were in Israel for the year, and I hadn't yet really learned Hebrew. And then suddenly I was going to school as a first grader in Israel. And it was a big obstacle, but I remember, the feeling of being a first grader in Israel, I think in many ways was a formative experience for me because, I remember taking the bus to school, and I remember like getting up in the
public bus,
taking a public bus, and climbing the stairs with my ticket and having the bus driver punch it, and standing and holding the bar and feeling like I can do anything. I'm an adult. I'm big, and I think that feeling of power and possibility for a little first grade Yoni, I think it's actually a little bit of like when kind of being Israeli permeated who I was, and I continue that thread till today.
Where did you go to school at? Like what city?
Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's I mean, I grew up in Israel. Obviously, I was born and raised there and was there most of my life. And being at school over there is very different. And you mentioned the bus. My daughter asked me the other day if we had school buses over there. And I'm like, no, we took the public bus to school or walked. We didn't have the yellow buses.
Yeah, well, now I have my kids go to school in Israel, and it's yeah,
it's a different experience for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Was there any specific moment or a trip that you took during your youth, like your time spent in Israel, that your connection to the country kind of shifted from a cultural obligation to like a personal passion, something that you want to, maintain that and get others to connect in that same way?
I think that for me, it was actually, so we were going back and forth to Israel many times over the years. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, my grandfather got sick. And so we stopped going as a family. My father's an only child, so he was really here to take care of his father. And we continued to travel to Israel, but in dribs and drabs, 2 people here, 1 person there. And I was the youngest. And there were quite a number of years where I actually wasn't going to Israel. And in an interesting way, I think my identity as someone for whom Israeli was really very personal to me was formed from this young upbringing in Israel, and then suddenly being disconnected for 6 or 7 very formative years. Till really I was in high school. I had this like big gap. And that experience, I think, made connecting people to Israel, like I felt connected to Israel, even though I wasn't going to Israel all the time, made it a big part of who I am. And my entire career since has been really about connecting people to Israel from when I got to college and until today.
So what took you, like, what kind of made you want to go into politics, I guess, if you go, working at the U.S. House and then at the Knesset? How did that work for you?
I never wanted to go into politics, and I did not go into politics. I was interested in policy. I was interested in change, and I felt like as complicated as the bureaucracy of government is, if you want to affect real, substantive, large-scale change, you have to do it in government. So my first job out of school was at the Israeli consulate in New York, where I represented the Israeli government to all kinds of populations in America. And after a couple of years, I realized I'm mostly a mouthpiece and not really able to impact. And so that's when I ended up first in Congress, learning what it was like to work on legislation. And then we moved to Israel, and I did a little bit of that at the Knesset.
Was there anything like the looking at it from inside, from the Knesset and the House, that taught you about like the unique friction and friendship between Israel and the U.S., like anything that you saw while working there?
Well, I think one of the things that was most interesting to me is that, working as a legislative assistant in Congress and then working as a parliamentary aide in the Knesset, here are these two countries that I feel so much a part of. I worked in the legislative bodies of each one. These are two democracies. I learned how different these two governments are, how differently they function. First of all, the fact that one's a parliamentary democracy and one is a democratic republic, very different systems. But also in Israel, we wear everything on our sleeves. Like you turn on the channel to watch the Knesset. If anyone does that, you see everybody yelling at each other. Congress, the same kind of friction happens, but it all happens behind the scenes. And then, C-SPAN, what happens on the floor of Congress is the theater that is kind of the outcome of it. So for me, it was really fascinating seeing how differently these two countries operate, and yet how much they're able to still find common ground and work with one another. Not always perfect.
Not always, unfortunately.
No, but that's like any relationship, it's got its ups and downs.
Right. Was there anything that surprised you about the differences between the two?
A lot surprised me about the differences between the two. In the U.S. government, in Congress, I was like one of a million people working there, a very, very, very tiny cog in the wheel. In the Knesset, it's a much smaller group of people. You're seeing everybody all the time, and there's this like familial, feel to the Knesset, and it's also so new. Like you walk into the Knesset, and like Ben Gurion was there, like 4 weeks ago. It feels like it's like the history. Even though Israel as a country has a much older history, and the U.S. is a very young nation. When you think about the governments, the U.S. government has been around for 250 years, and the Israeli government has been around for 2-3 generations. So it feels like a different kind of beast.
Yeah, it's interesting. And what about the people working there? Because that's also very different. Also, the way the governments run altogether.
Yeah. Well, that's actually why my time I was in Congress for a couple of years, in the Knesset for less than 6 months, because of how different the systems operate. In Congress, every senator and congressman is part of a political party, but ultimately, if you want to retain your seat, you have to be responding to your constituents. And so congressmen have a certain amount of autonomy. They can vote however they feel that they need to vote, which means that their staff are important advisors for them. because their staff, the job of the staff is to understand the legislation being put out, but also understand the constituency. And sometimes you get to talk to your boss and say, listen, I think you should vote this way on this and that way on that because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
The Israeli system, very different. First of all, members of Knesset have a far smaller staff. They have 2 or 3 people at most. But second of all, a member of Knesset has to vote with their party. And the party often has to vote with the coalition. So the parliamentary aide's opinion on a piece of legislation is completely irrelevant. And many of the people who were in similar roles to mine in the Knesset were trying to get into politics, and I was not trying to get into politics. And I was ultimately grateful that it was not a very long run. And then I found myself shifting into the nonprofit world, and I learned it's not just in government that you can really make a big difference in the world.
Yeah.
And I never looked back.
Yeah, it does seem like in the Israeli politics that, in the Knesset, that people that work in minor roles eventually either shift to politics and go into one of the parties, or they just step out completely.
Right.
Yeah.
I was lucky that it happened quickly for me.
Yeah, it's better, I guess, that it's that quick. So let's go back a little bit to your time, the time that you made Aliyah. What made you want to do that eventually, and then study and serve as a lone soldier in the IDF?
So, I mean, growing up back and forth, it always felt like Israel was a part of my identity. I always knew that I wanted to move to Israel. But I also grew up in America, and so there were things that I wanted to do in America before I would move to Israel. So I knew that I wanted to go to college in America. I actually served in the Army in the middle of my college service through a program of called Machar, which is for essentially, you volunteer, you join the Army, it's a shorter service, and then eventually when you make Aliyah, so you go into Miluim, into reserve duty. So I joined the Army in 2002. In the middle of my college experience. I was in college before, and I got back to college afterwards, which is a super complicated thing that I don't know that I would recommend. And then I made Aliyah with my wife when she was pregnant with our oldest in 2009.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a big gap.
Yeah. And then we were back here and then back there. But yeah.
What was it like for you as an American going into the IDF and serving alongside Israeli soldiers? Was there like a culture shock, or was it anything that?
So fortunately, there wasn't. I mean, fortunately, my Hebrew was fluent, and the culture shock that I experienced was, I think, the same that they were experiencing. It was learning the world of the Army that you've heard about and you think you know about from friends and siblings, but you don't actually know till you go through it. I think my being an American was not really apparent. Mm-hmm. It's a completely immersive experience. And so when I joined the Army, I was a soldier like every other soldier. The difference came when suddenly it was time for me to be released. And I was one of 2 or 3, 4 people who were leaving the unit, and everybody else was continuing onwards, which was that was when it suddenly became different.
So what was it like for you returning for Miluim afterwards?
I didn't do Miluim till 2009, so it was quite a few years later. Yeah. In some ways I had almost forgotten what it was like to be a soldier, and it seemed like another part of my identity and another lifetime. And suddenly there I was, back in uniform, doing the same things. It was in a weird way, it felt like coming home. It was something that was important to me, and I had always wanted to be, joining the Army for a shorter service is really a way of training yourself to be able to do Miluim for years and years and years. And I hadn't done that, and so when I moved to Israel and made Aliyah and started doing Miluim, I felt like I was, earning my place as an Israeli. And
then much later on came October 7th.
And then much later on came October 7th. Yeah. So we were back in America for a few years. Mm-hmm. And then when we came back to Israel, again, I felt like I missed all these years of Miluim. So I reached out to my my unit and I said, I'm back, plug me in. And they said, great, what's your specialty? And I said, I'm a sharpshooter. And they said, great, how old are you? And I said, 38. And they said, no thanks.
It's like on the edge of like, yeah.
And they said, listen, we have training scheduled for like a week after your 40th birthday. So it's meaningless to put you on the roster. So I reached out to a former commander of mine and I said, I'm not going to push myself where I don't belong, but if you have somewhere that I can be useful, let me know. And he said, I have somewhere to put you. And he told me, you're going to be on the operations team. And I said, great. What is that? He said, you'll see. So in September of 2023, we had a week of training where I learned what that was and what it was like. And it was a very different kind of role for me. But by the end of the week, I felt like, oh, okay. I think I understand what I can do and how I can be, impactful and do something important. And, at the end of the training, they said what they always say, which is, see you at the next war. Did not expect that to happen a few weeks later.
Yeah.
But then what happened, and now I've done more than 400 days of Miluim in the last 2.5 years.
So what was that experience like? Because I spoken to other reservists before, and I had someone on the show as well, and everybody had a different experience, but also the same in terms of being thrown into it all of a sudden. And also a lot of people in their 40s and 50s were taken to the reservists because there was no other choice. And that's very different as, someone in their 40s, going and doing the same job you did when you were 19 is very difficult.
Right. So I wasn't doing the same job I was doing when I was 19. So my job in the first part of the war, I was in the operations center in what's called the Kidmit. So where the brigade, where the Chativa oversees and coordinates all of the operations of our unit, that's where I was sitting. A different role than in the past. My story, I guess, similar and different, I guess, than others. On the morning of October 7th, my wife keeps her phone on Shabbat because that's a thing that she does, and sitting on her bedside table, and she got alerts that there were rockets in Tel Aviv, and we live in Modi'in. And usually, and at least in the last time it had happened, when there's rockets in Tel Aviv, Modi'in might be next. So I turned on my phone, and I had a message from the head of our team that said, "Be ready." In my innocence, I said to my wife, I know that our unit is a Miluim unit, all reservists. I said, I knew that we were in some way connected to the northern border. I said to my wife, I don't know what's going on, but if it's rockets from Gaza, it's not going to affect us. A few minutes later, I got another message. It said, we've been called up. Get here. What I didn't know until later, we were the first Miluim unit fully drafted on October 7th. And part of it's because our brigade commander, the Machat, called us up without any orders to do so. He saw what was happening. He made the decision, and there we went. And I think it was about 36 hours later, our unit went down to the Gaza, to the Otef, to the Gaza envelope, and we were given the sector that encompassed the Nova site and Kibbutz Be'eri and Nachal Oz and Alumim and Re'im, and that was our sector. And we were there till the middle of February. And then in Gaza till the middle of February.
Yeah. So I assume you also went to the Lebanon area, also up north, and everything else throughout this entire ordeal. Yeah. Not just the first one, but the second.
First we were there. Yeah. Second round we were in my unit. People talk about 7-8 rounds. We only have done 5, but we do long ones
only.
So the first round we did till February. It was just there. Then we did 3 months in the Netzarim Carter in Gaza. Then we did 3 months in Rafah. And then just now in January, we had a month and a half in Syria, and it was supposed to be our shortest ever. And then a few days before the end of the round, it was sent us to Lebanon. We did like a month in Lebanon, and it was still our shortest round. But I just got home a few days before Pesach, and it's been.
So what was that like now? Because I mean, obviously it's different than what was on October 7th. What was it like for you being on that side right now during this current war that nobody knows if it's over or not? Like it's very up in the air right now.
Well, the first part when I was in Syria, it was very interesting and quiet. It's a very fascinating situation where we are not at war with Syria. The Israeli army is in Syria, and you're driving through villages, and people wave at you, and you wave back. There's a lot of humanitarian aid. There's a lot of relationship building happening in Syria. We're keeping our eyes on what's happening there, but it's quiet. It was beautiful. Also, this is one of the most beautiful areas in Israel, and one of the most beautiful times of the year. January, February, everything's green and cold, but green and flowering and everything. And then suddenly everything changed. Suddenly we're at war. I was home for Shabbat on the day that the war with Iran started, the latest one. I found myself driving back up north, pulling over every, few minutes to duck and cover from the next missile. And then we went into Lebanon. They moved us over to Lebanon, and we went right in. It was, and my role shifted as well. So I was this time in the shetach, in the field, helping to coordinate the different parts of our unit that were there and the missions that they're carrying out and what they're doing. And it's a very intensive experience. It's also the best people are the ones who are the farthest to the front. I wrote something at some point about the feeling of being exposed not only to rocket fire, but also being exposed to the best parts of Israeli society. And then when you leave to go home, I went home for like 48 hours. So it's the most bizarre experience, because you exit Lebanon and you feel like you're leaving the war zone. And then like the second you get out, suddenly you have a siren on your phone from Iran.
Yeah.
It's like I left the war in Lebanon, and then on the way home, I immediately pop into this other war that my family is experiencing, and I go into that war zone. And then I go home for 48 hours, and we're like running to the mamad every few minutes. And then at the end of 48 hours, I say, you guys got this war. I need to get back to that war. And then I drive back up, and it's this bizarre.
It's crazy. It's a very surreal. I mean, I don't know if people understand the extent of this whole thing. I don't think they can understand, honestly, because they're not there physically. The only ones who actually see everything are the IDF soldiers. You guys are right there.
I think I've heard a lot of people talking about how, in general, I think there's been two disconnects, and maybe it's just because of how long the war has been going on, but I think there's, in Israel, the extent to which people who are in, the largest part of the population in Israel, that are in the center of Israel, we're so aware of the war with Iran that the war with Lebanon, it was like, oh, is there a war happening? Like, what's going on? No one's really quite sure. Whereas I'm there and I'm like, we're in war. And then there's the disconnect between America and Israel, where you have, for Israelis, the 6 weeks of war with Iran was an extraordinarily intensive, disruption of life. And somehow it seems like that didn't, I think because America was with the war in Iran, and here it's much more of a politicized
Yeah,
situation.
exactly.
People were focused on that aspect, and for people to think, oh, do I support the war with Iran? It's connected to my support or disagreement with President Trump. And there was no kind of awareness in some ways of how much was happening in Israel. The fact that like schools were shut down and offices were shut down, and like no one's ever sleeping more than an hour straight, and the 12-day war last summer was intensive. This was more intensive for a far longer period, and I think that somehow that there was a disconnect there.
Yeah, I think people were too busy getting upset about the U.S. joining the war rather than trying to see it from all angles. And I mean, my whole family's in Israel, and I've been talking to them obviously every day throughout the whole thing, and just learning how constant it was. Like going to shelter, you're getting back home, you have to run again. You're getting back home, you have to run again in the middle of the night, multiple times. Like, it's just crazy. I mean, it's obviously was a lot more intense than last time, and it's like, yeah, lives have been disrupted completely. People did not go to work. The kids did not go to school. It's tough. It's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
I wish there was a way for, I mean, people can post videos and talk about it on social media as much as they want, but I don't think I wish there was some kind of a way to actually convey what was going on to make people on the other side understand.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. We are creatures of our own environment, and so the world in which it's very hard to step into someone's shoes. One of the reasons I'm so grateful for having grown up in these two places is I can much more easily place myself in one or another. I can live in Israel and experience what's happening in Israel, and then understand how an American on the other side of the ocean is like disconnected from it or reading about it and not understanding, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I can be sitting in a house in Lebanon and it feel like a normal thing as an Israeli, and then I can take a step back out of myself and be like, this is crazy. I'm sitting in a house in Lebanon. What am I doing here? As an American.
Yeah.
So I can but it's very hard. It's very hard. One of the things that I did early in the war is I started a WhatsApp group. It was like an update to my family, my wife and my parents and my in-laws, to just keep them aware of where I was, so I wouldn't have to write 3 times. It ended up becoming this very big WhatsApp group, and I ended up being sort of like a live journal where I was just writing what I was experiencing, and it got published in the Sapir journal, which I was really not very aware of the extent to which it was sort of getting around, but it ended up being a way for me to communicate what was happening through the eyes of somebody who understands what an American's perspective is, and is writing about this traumatic and dramatic and incredible experience as it evolved in real time.
Yeah, that's why I think a lot of people have been saying this. It's very important to visit Israel because it's very different. This is not what you see on the news. Yeah. Being there in real time and experiencing the whole thing is very different than watching it on the news, seeing bombs and fires and all that stuff.
For sure. Somebody asked me yesterday, they said, how do you feel raising children in Israel? Like, does it feel like a big decision to take your children to this place that's so dangerous? And I said, well, let me tell you something. Last year, my daughter, who was 15 at the time, once a week would go out after dark by herself, walk past the train station, walk past the mall, walk into a dark park, and work out with a couple of other women. In what city in America could I utter that sentence?
Yeah, sure.
I said, there's lots of dangerous things in Israel, and probably the most dangerous thing is crossing the street. But when I think about where I want to raise my children and where I feel where I feel safest and where I think, the right place for me to raise my children, not a question.
Yeah, I think like for me, as when I moved to the US, one of the things that kind of shocked me the most is the fact that children cannot be left outside unattended or whatever. Because in Israel, growing up, we were outside all the time by ourselves. Nobody even looked at us, until we went home. Nobody looked at us. So that's a huge difference. That's
Yeah.
So speaking of all that, you used to work for Taglit, right? For Birthright.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you? And also, why do you think it's important to bring those mostly teenagers and young adults to Israel, especially during these times?
Well, I think you said it. I mean, one of the hardest things is for people to understand someone else that's having a different experience than they are. And I think that the experience of a Taglit, of going to Israel for 10 days, it's not just, a connection to Jewish identity.
Mm-hmm.
It's also seeing and experiencing Israel. Now, granted, 10 days is a short time, but I think, when I worked at Birthright at Taglit, one of the most important things that they did, and I think is really an incredible paradigm shift for how we engage young people around Israel, is the mifgash. Is they're taking, they take a bunch of Israelis and stick them on the bus, and so you're traveling through this experience, but you're also getting to talk to people who are your peers.
Yeah.
And at one point, there's somebody said, I feel like Birthright is all propaganda. They're just like telling people what to think. And I said, I'll give you very easy proof it's not propaganda. You cannot tell an Israeli to tell Americans anything you want to, much less 8 or 10 of them.
Yeah.
The minute they're putting a bunch of Israelis in the bus, they're saying, just see it for what it is. It was an amazing experience working at Taglit Birthright. I was the Ozel Mankal, the right hand of the CEO. Mm-hmm. I got to see everything that was happening and understand. I mean, it's a complicated thing to bring individual private funders and public government funding and nonprofits and for-profits and the army, and put all these things together and get everyone working together and agreeing on what something should look like. And then to do that at the scale that they do, it was a tremendous experience. I'm very grateful for having had the chance to work there. I think it's one of the most important organizations out there. In many ways, where I work now is an outcome of having worked there and feeling like, okay, that's amazing. Now we need to do the next thing, to take it further.
Yeah. So what was that transition like for you? Like to go from that world to now the nonprofit, and then connecting students in particularly to Israel, and also if you can talk about what Tamid does, because I don't know if a lot of people know about this.
Sure. So when I was at Birthright, one of the things that everyone liked to always say, I used to say, great, 10 days is wonderful. What happens afterwards? And when I was there, what I really wanted to say is, it's not enough. We're investing so much time and effort in this 10-day trip. Hello, Jewish world. You take it further. We light the spark, but really, what I also realized at the same time was the best possible follow-up for this transformational 10-day trip is going to be someone who comes to a participant and says, you remember that amazing, life-changing experience? Here's something you should get involved with. It's not the same. It won't feel the same, but you should do it anyway. And that felt to me like, that's really hard. And if we really want to engage people with Israel, we need to do it from a place of what they're interested in. And that was what I held in my head. And I ended up going to business school. We ended up moving back to America. I went to business school. And not long after I graduate, I found myself interviewing for a job with sophomores and juniors in college. And they explained they came to college, they wanted people to think a certain way about Israel, and they immediately realized nobody cares. People didn't come to college to form opinions about Israel. And if they want them, to be connected to Israel, they need to figure out what they're interested in and make Israel a part of that. And I was like, yeah, but you figured it out at 19, and I'm just figuring that out now. And so what they did is they created a program which started as a club, and it's all about reaching out to students who want to be successful in their careers and saying to them, you want to be successful? You should learn from the smartest people in the world, the most innovative people in the world, the most entrepreneurial people in the world. These are Israelis. And so all of Tamid's programs are focused on that idea. So I'll explain. So a Tamid student, a student who joins Tamid Group is a freshman who comes to college and they go to their club fair, and they're not thinking, what Jewish thing should I get involved with? They might not even be Jewish. What they're thinking is, do I need to join the business fraternity or the investment club or Tamid Group? So they're thinking, should I join the business fraternity or the investment club or Tamid Group? And when they choose Tamid, if you ask them, why did you choose Tamid? They will not say Israel. They will not say Judaism. They will say, I was looking for an internship experience, a community, a network, a real world experience that I can bring to when I graduate. And what we do is, in the first semester, they come together once a week and they learn about Israel through the prism of business. We teach them a little bit of strategy, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of operations, and we teach them about Israel through those, so that by the end of that semester, they really understand what it means when we say Startup Nation, and they're really excited about the opportunity to learn from Israelis. And then from there, every semester afterwards, they get to work with Israelis. We put them into teams. We match them with an Israeli startup. And without putting anyone on any airplanes, they get to work with one another through the semester on real projects. And the best and brightest, we have an internship program. They come to Israel for the summer. They live in Tel Aviv. They get to take the bus to work every day. They work at amazing companies. And then they come back to campus and they run the chapters on campus. And then when they graduate, we continue, because I'm not in the business of students. I'm in the business of creating a meaningful and strong connection to Israel for the next generation of business leaders. So our alumni, we have an angel community that's investing in Israeli companies. We have alumni that are consulting to and with Israeli startups that need guidance in something. They're doing joint ventures. They're supporting Israeli organizations. They're traveling, all kinds of things.
That's amazing. How do you help them navigate between what they want to do in terms of professionally, business, all that in Israel, and between the pressure that they go through on college campuses right now with everybody being anti-Israel and this whole sentiment around Israel?
Well, so in the height of the encampments and the protests, and it was like April, May 2024, I was in New York and I sat down for dinner with the chapter presidents of our chapters in New York, NYU and Columbia and Baruch and a few others. Not all of them are Jewish. 30% of our students, 30% are not Jewish.
Oh.
And I said to them, what's it like running a chapter of Tamid right now? I mean, we are a non-political and non-religious organization, and Israel is right now on campus. It's like the most, fraught subject. So one of the students said to me, she said, first of all, don't worry. We have been listed as a Zionist entity that everyone should boycott. We're on the list. Don't worry.
Of course.
But she said, we're not advocacy. We're activists. But our activism isn't walking through campus carrying a flag and pushing yourself into that fight. Our activism is sitting in a team room on a Zoom call with an Israeli CEO, half of whose staff has been called off to war, and helping him get his work done. And so we feel like, first, we're flying below the radar, but we're doing something far more important. We're active, not on campus. We're active there.
Yeah.
We're doing things. And I'll tell you, when I came back to work after my first 4 months in this war, really not having been totally disconnected from what was happening with Tamid, the first thing that I encountered was emails in my inbox from Israeli entrepreneurs that said things like, "We can't underscore the extent to which your students carried us through the fourth quarter, and we need them this spring." And I realized that what had happened was on October 7th, we had, as we usually do, we had about 150 teams across our campuses working with Israeli companies. And then October 7th happened. So what did they do? Naturally, for the students, they reached out to the companies and they said, "We got your back. What more can we take on?" Which is amazing. So
Yeah.
you'd asked me 3 years ago, what is our organization's purpose? I would have said, building a connection to Israel. But I realize it's much more than that, and it's far more focused. It's not just about building a connection. It's about doing something. And so today, if you ask me, I would say our purpose is to maximize the number of our members who are not only very successful and in positions of power, but are tangibly, quantifiably, meaningfully engaged with Israel. They are investing in Israeli companies. They're supporting Israeli organizations. They're traveling to Israel. They're doing joint ventures. They're consulting with. They're mentoring. They're doing something. Because I'm not afraid anymore to say, maybe it's because of the war. I'm not afraid to say if somebody really feels connected to Israel, but they don't do anything about it, we haven't done enough. That's a failure on our part. And if they happen to stumble into working at some Israeli company, but it's just incidental and doesn't matter to them, also not good enough.
Yeah,
that's where we are.
Matter, right?
That's where we are.
But it's good. I mean, it's interesting to hear that you have a lot of non-Jewish participants as well, and that they took it upon themselves to help Israeli companies, and they look at it in a certain way, especially nowadays, because you never know.
Yeah, and it's what's amazing is I met yesterday. I spoke with one of our students who led one of our strongest chapters, which is at Berkeley.
That's tough.
Not known to be the friendliest campus.
Mm.
And she said it was just it's amazing to her and so normal for her now that she feels so connected to Israel.
Wow.
You know, these are students who they feel Israeli. They feel a little bit Israeli, and that's what they take with them into their careers. And they feel like, I am successful and I'm going to be successful because a part of me is Israeli. And I will tell you, I didn't get it. I didn't get it at first. I really didn't. And I mean, I grew up back and forth. So for me, being connected to Israel was a part of who I was. But these students, the alumni, they didn't do that. They didn't go through that experience. And this one of the students who interviewed me for the job, because I got this job because he grew up, he was born Jewish, but had no connection to Judaism, no connection to Israel, no interest in either one of them. But he went to college and he realized he wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so he managed to get connected to Tamid, and he ended up going on our summer program in Israel. And he told me 2 weeks into the internship, he's riding the bus home, he's looking around and he says, "These are my people." And I said, "You mean like because they're Jewish, but they're secular and they're modern?" And he says, No. He said, "Listen, these people, they're going to change the world. No problem is too big. No obstacle is too big. If you're 20 or if you're 120, but you're motivated, you're on the team." And he said to me, "That's who I want to be." And I was like, oh, that's when the coin dropped. That's when I got it. And I get to see it thousands of times over.
Yeah, that's amazing. What do you think like the future looks like for the relationship between the American Jewish community, particularly the younger generation, with Israel and our current, Gen Z, Gen Alpha? But what do you think the future looks like for that?
I don't know what the future looks like. I do think that there are a lot of really important, tough conversations happening around how the Jewish community thinks about Israel education. Because Israel is a complicated place and the issues are complicated. And you can't just say, oh, they just don't understand us. Because we don't have that luxury. Israel's a small country. We can't go it on our own. Almost no country can go it on their own.
Right.
So I think there's some important and tough conversations happening around Israel education. I hope that more and more efforts will learn what we have learned, which is that if you want to engage people with Israel, Jewish or non-Jewish, you have to find a way to do it on their terms. Think about the fact that not just the non-Jews, but across Tamid, the majority of our students, the vast majority of our students don't do anything else connected to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that they're not doing birthright and they're not going to Hillel. And this is the only thing they do is connected to Israel. If we weren't connecting them, no one would be. And for the majority of our students, it's the most important thing they do outside of class. So like, this is really important for them, and it's connected to Israel, and they know it, and they're excited about it, because I'm not selling the Jewish homeland. I'm not selling Bibi Netanyahu. I'm not selling the only democracy in the Middle East. I'm certainly not selling government policies. I'm selling them Israelis. I'm saying, meet these people. See how they think about the world and they think about life. Think about how they have become stronger and more resilient because of all the challenges that they face. See how much you can learn from that. Tap into that. Be a little bit of that kind of person yourself. And it resonates for them. I'm not pushing anything down their throat. I don't care what their politics are. I don't care what their religion are. And I see it happen. I see it even happen with, we had a student, he said, he got to college and an upperclassman said, you should get involved with Tamid. And he told me that his only class he'd ever taken that connected to Israel, the only time he'd ever thought about Israel, was a class that he took, which was entitled Palestinian Poets of the late 1940s.
Oh.
You can imagine what his perspective was on Israel.
Yeah.
When the student said, you should get involved with Tamid, and explained what it was, this guy said, not really to Israel. No, thank you. And what did the students say? Irrelevant. What do you want to do with your career? And he said, I want to be involved in automotive technology. And he said, great. Israel, Tel Aviv has one of the foremost automotive tech accelerators in the world. Now look at where our alumni work. Look at the kinds of companies they work at. If you want to be successful, this is your opportunity. So this student held his nose about Israel, and he got involved. And of course, he said, and I learned how amazing Israel is, and how amazing the people are, and that all of my preconceived notions were wrong. And he was able to do that because we didn't say to him, come join this pro-Israel organization. We didn't say to him, come, go, shout at people in encampments.
Yeah.
Said, come, learn how to be amazing.
That's great. I think maybe that's the angle we should try, because you go online on social media, you see all these activists and all advocacy efforts for Israel, but everything goes to the same place eventually. Like, this is,
who's convincing anyone else?
Right. We're trying to convince through things, trying to defend ourselves, and I guess
which we need to do.
Yeah.
We can't be quiet.
Right. No, definitely not quiet. But I feel like there has to be a different way of approaching it, because this is unfortunately not working that much.
Right.
So, but
we are growing. We grew when COVID was happening. We have been growing and growing in this war. Our Jewish membership is growing. Our non-Jewish membership is growing. We have 63 campuses now. We have another dozen that are trying to build more campuses. We're in the very fortunate position of having more demand than we have the financial capacity to handle, which is a great place to be. It's still tough. We still have to find new financial partners, but it's amazing to be in a place where there's more than we can handle of demand. Think about this. You have to apply to join a Tamid chapter.
Right.
Only 1/3 get accepted, which means we are growing, and we're also turning away 2/3 of the students because they're not serious enough or aggressive enough, or there's a variety of things that we use to identify who are going to be those future leaders. It's just a tremendous opportunity, and it's an extraordinarily important population of people who are, I mean, one of our alumni a few weeks ago, he said to me, by the way, I was in a meeting with the president and the ambassador to Israel and some Saudi diplomats. And when it was my turn to speak, and my jaw is just dropping further and further. So what does he say? He said, I thank the president for his support of Israel.
Okay.
Sure. That's what I was doing when I was 27.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you think like there's a different way of doing the same thing you're doing, but without connecting it to business directly, or?
It doesn't have to be just business. It's about finding what people care about, not just the issues. What they're, one of the benefits of tapping into people's careers is you always are caring about your career till you retire. So if you think connecting to Israel is important to your career, it's going to stay with you for 40, 50 years. So it's about tapping into what people care about and then making Israel a part of that. That's what I believe.
All right. Well, that's fascinating. Yeah. So where can people find more information about Tamid, and if they want to, maybe some college students want to apply?
Absolutely. The easiest place is TamidGroup.org. You can find information about where we have chapters, where we don't have chapters if you want to start one. You can find information about supporting the organization if you're philanthropic. If you're an Israeli startup or Israeli company, you can find a way to connect to our team. We're, of course, on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, and all of the media of all the kinds.
All right. Well, make sure you guys follow and go and learn about Tamid, and who knows what's going to happen in the future.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you for having
me. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Same thing.
All right, and thank you all for listening. Until next time.